US started to play a role vis-à-vis domestic politics in Pakistan. And I will only give 3 vignettes illustrating this capacity of the US to enter the domestic domain. The first vignette is very simple. In 1977, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto is watching the results on television, election results, important elections, and who is on his right? The American ambassador. If we go by the biography of Stanley Wolpert, that seems to be reliable on that front. And if we go by the autobiography of Henry Byrod, who is the man in question. But there are very few prime ministers in the world who are watching the results of their election with the ambassador of America on the right. Very few. And it's a sense, it's an indication of the extent into which, yes, the relations had gone. Second vignette, another Bhutto, Benazir, is picked up by the US and by the British in 2007 to tie up with Musharraf, because Musharraf has the back to the wall, the lawyers are in the street, he is really weak, and they don't want to remove him, but they don't want to deal with him only. So Negroponte is instrumental in striking a kind of deal. There'll be a kind of Dirumvira. Musharraf will remain, Benazir will become prime minister, and that way everything will be fine. Of course, one problem occurred. The emergency was declared in November 2007, and Benazir could not deal with Musharraf anymore. But that was the plan. Third and last vignette, the Memo Gate. The Memo Gate in 2011 is the name we give to a scam resulting from the sending of a memo by Zardari, the president, via Hussein Haqqani, or by Hussein Haqqani on his own. He was ambassador to the US at that time, who knows? But the point is that after the Bin Laden raid, these civilians felt the need to ask the Americans to rescue because they were fearing a coup. It may be an exaggerating sense of vulnerability, it may be reliable. Whatever the reason, there are few countries asking the Americans to come to their rescue in such circumstances. So once again, you see how the domestic dynamic is influenced by the Americans, who sometimes not to be part of that. And in that particular case, Millen did not know how to handle this, because to come to the rescue to Zardari when he was dealing with Kayani would have been very complicated. So he preferred to keep his hands off. So they're not necessarily willing to be part of the game, the Americans, but they are asked to come and help repeatedly. So that's the way the US-Pakistan relations have evolved and made the US somewhat a domestic player. But this is, as I say in this book, in my chapter, a clientelistic kind of relation. And these relations are unstable. What is a clientelistic kind of relation? There is a boss, the US, who need a client, the Pakistanis, to fix issues for them in the region. Contain communism. You'll get the money, you'll get the weapons, but fix that. Well, these relations are unstable by definition because there is no affinity in terms of ideas. There is no common interest except the mutual interest of sharing spoils. But when any small change occurs, it can derail the whole process. And a small thing happened, well, not for India, the 62 war. Not such a small thing, but the 62 war made the whole amity, friendship between Pakistan and the US somewhat evolve, because Ayub Khan was pissed off by the way Kennedy came to the rescue of Nehru. And he said, if this is it, that I'll turn to other lions. He had at that time in his autobiography a very interesting sentence saying, I will use one lion against another. Um, this lion, this other lion, is China. This is the beginning of a relationship that is the all-weather kind of relationship. Well, we have many less vignettes on this, much more difficult to illustrate how the Chinese have influenced the domestic politics of Pakistan. But I would make two suggestions. One has to do with the Lal Masjid operation, 2007. There is a strong suspicion that this operation took place because some Chinese people had been attacked in Islamabad and that the Chinese wanted the Pakistani army to fix that. It may not be the main factor, it may not be but it's an additional factor that might have played a role. More importantly, and more, I would say, topically, there has been recently a very interesting suggestion coming from the Chinese side that their investments along the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, need to be protected. And if Dawn is well informed, and usually Dawn is well informed, they have suggested, I quote, to form a consultative forum on the pattern of apex committees, which means that they have suggested the Pakistanis to organize the protection of their investments in a very specific manner, because apex committees today, for those who follow Pakistani affairs, know that it's a joint venture between civilians and military, but the military have the upper hand in this. So they are asking the civilians to please let the military protect our investments in the region, and the please may not be there forever. So it's a very interesting sign of the way they can, yes, push in some direction. Last but not least, after the 71 war, even China was not seen as such a reliable ally. And that's why they turned more decisively towards a third external player, Saudi Arabia, which had never been so close to Pakistan. In fact, in this book, there is a fascinating chapter by Sana Arun showing how, for the Muslim world, Pakistan was not such a legitimate partner for years, pro-American and pro-Israeli indirectly, when the Palestinian issue was there and so on. But after 71, after the making of Bangladesh, after the defeat of 71, Bhutto went west and he visited a large number of countries in what he called his journey of resistance. Iran, Turkey, Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, Algeria, Egypt, Syria. Then he came back and he went again. Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, Ethiopia, and so on and so forth. Asking for help, asking for support. And of course, Saudis were the most important ones. And you know the story about the Saudis. It's a very somewhat clear game that was in fact made clear by a WikiLeaks cabal. Prince Turki bin Sultan, who was the Saudi intelligence in charge, if we go by this, WikiLeaks said the Pakistan-Saudi Arabia relations are probably the closest relationships in the world between any two countries. And the Saudi ambassador to the US, another WikiLeaks, 2007, said that in Pakistan, we are not observers in Pakistan, we are participants. Again, very difficult to document that by vignettes. That's much more secretive. You just see so many visits, and you see two things that everybody knows. The money that flows is channelized towards some groups which are supporting some agenda, the Ali Hadith tradition with, of course, some Sunni militancy, with one hidden agenda, well, not so hidden in the 80s, to contain Iran, to contain the Iranian influence in Pakistan. So Pakistan became a kind of terrain for some proxy war between Sunni militant groups and Shia militant groups. And yes, these people were playing a part of the domestic game. Recently, in fact, very recently, I've been told that when the Pakistanis said no to the Saudis when they were asked to take part in the Yemen war, in reaction, Riyadh tried to instrumentalize some of these groups to push in that direction. Well, this is exactly what extraversion means. When you have in your society groups which are paying allegiance to other countries which can instrumentalize them for their own benefit. So this is why, and I hope I've been convincing enough, I consider that we have a country that is an interface, but we have seen only one face. Now we have to see the other face, domestic face.
Thank you, Christophe. Thank you very much for being lucid.
I am Ishan Russell.
I'm Tracy Shilchi and you're watching News Tonight.
Together with the team of our
Dedicated professionals from across various fields.
This is Shyam Sundar,
Vishal Dahiya,
Akhilesh Suman,
Frank Pereira from Beijing, China.
Kriti Mishra for Rajya Sabha Television.
We bring to you
the news that matters here on Rajya Sabha TV.
Mariam Abu Zahab has a chapter called Turmoil in the Frontier. Hassan Abbas, a chapter called Internal Security Issues in Pakistan and Law Enforcement Reform, which of course is his particular interest. And Shah Javed Burki and Adnan Nasimullah have a chapter on Pakistan's economy. A few days ago, Cyril Almeida in Dawn had a very nice column in which he talked about the turf wars that have emerged now between Nawaz Sharif and Raheel Sharif, as it were, in the context of the Panama Papers, which, as you probably all know, have named sons of Nawaz Sharif. The turf war struck a bell to me. I talk in my chapter about the tug of war between the between the state apparatus and the political wing of the country. In my book, I talk on India, Pakistan, and Democracy. I talk about the balance of power between the state apparatus, civil and military, on the one side, and the politicals on the other. And I think that still is the best way of thinking about what goes on in Pakistan. Looking at this balance of power, or tug of war, if you wish. In my chapter, I talk about the judiciary as allegedly the referee in this tug of war, but in fact is takes a hand on one side of the rope or the other. And that is something I think we've seen in Pakistan and seen tragically in Pakistan since its beginning. That is to say, a balance of power which has favored the state apparatus, the military in particular, but typically the bureaucracy in partnership over elected democratic, in quotes, I think, representatives and members of government. it accounts for the breakup of Pakistan because the military in particular was not prepared to allow a democratic result to take place. And it, I think, in many ways is a useful way of thinking about how external influence is brought into the domestic scene. That is to say, just starting with the American connection, since I have to blush for that, consider myself blushing for the American connection. America, as Aisha Jalal has pointed out very nicely, is critically responsible in the 50s for giving the military more power, more influence, more final say, as it were, through its aid and I think its encouragement, because at that time we liked anybody who was quote unquote containing communism, and dictators didn't matter. We had lots of dictators who were our dictators, we thought. And from that period, various kinds of external influences have come in. Let me just try and do a little bit of this is a quick note kind of thing. I think that one of the critical things to think about in domestic terms is what I think the political economy is actually the pivotal issue here. And for me, it's always been the case that I've thought of Pakistan as most importantly a rentier state. And I think one can argue also that the military within is a rentier institution, as it were, within the rentier state. Pakistan has suffered in this framing from a classic resource curse, which is normally thought of as oil and gas, which allows you to buy your military, buy your expertise, buy your alliances, and therefore not have to go to your people for taxation or for support or anything else. Pakistan starts out life, as it were, particularly West Pakistan, with a very important agricultural and then quickly agro-industrial endowment, which allows it to flourish and do much better than India, as they always point out, in the 50s and 60s. Then again with the American connection and ideas about how you develop, and the way you develop was to put your money and your capital into places that can use it most efficiently, and they happen to be in West Pakistan instead of East Pakistan, so be it. And so that in turn then exacerbates the inequalities and that occur when the military takes over in 58. It gets even worse. Pakistan has had the, I would say, ill luck to have a renewal of its resource. Just as the agro-industrial resource curse is sort of waning, they managed to after 71, and they're now a separate country, a separate place, and Bangladesh has gone its own way. The oil shocks come, and suddenly there's a huge influx of remittance money and job opportunities and places to put a lot of people who would otherwise be in the streets making trouble for you. Because a lot of Pakistan had an enormous advantage in the Muslim world of having a relatively well-educated, and particularly technically well-educated people, human capital, to export to what I think of not as the Middle East, but as the Near West, as far as Pakistan is concerned. In addition to that, and I won't go into this detail, of course U.S. aid starts to come in after for the Afghan jihad. The drug monies are well used, as it were, within Pakistan, so they get that flow of resources. And then, just as all of this starts to disappear after the end of the Afghan jihad, and there's a sort of a tapering off and very great difficulties in the 80s, along comes 9/11, and the 90s, and along comes 9/11, and once again the U.S. pours money in and they're able to make do as a rentier state. They don't need to collect taxes. And to this day, Pakistan's tax collection is abysmal by international standards. And I don't have the figures offhand. They're in the chapter that you can see. It seems to me an open question right now as to whether Pakistan, which is now going to be faced once again with, I think, probably not as much aid from China as they think they're going to get, plus the climate change-induced crises in water, plus power, and they have now fallen behind in terms of economic growth issues to India, and they're unable, whether congenitally or not, but it's seemingly unable to make the leap of faith to open up to a trade regime with India, which might serve to solve some of the problems. From time to time, there have been some thoughts of that, but because of, and here's where the military, as its own rentier state, military incorporated, as Aisha Siddiqa has written,
She's here.
and she's here, indeed, and so I won't say anything more about that.
It's really important, I think, for us to value this work because we are not doing much ourselves. It's such a pity that India does not produce any serious work on Pakistan, where Pakistan kind of seems to consume at least our television time every evening. Every minor thing gets blown apart. As a collective, while we seem to invest so much outrage every day these days, but there is no intellectual investment in understanding Pakistan. And I think that's a huge problem. I mean, I think hopefully I see that more and more Indian students now go to Paris to do Sciences Po. I hope you get some of Indians to begin to work on Pakistan, because I think we really need it for us to deal with this question, issue, problem, whatever you want to say. The third point I wanted to make was on the terms that we've used. I mean, I think the book, you talk about, what is it, terror state, some of us would like to call it a rogue state, a failed state, failing state, a semi-failed state, all kinds of names, a garrison state, and you've given us so much names, and a rentier state, I mean, the idea that you discuss. But the central point you're making is really about the internal and the external, how the two get linked up, and that how this gets an extra play in Pakistan, how the external plays such a role in determining the internal. Is there another way of thinking about this? I mean, which is you talked about a rentier state. Maybe you can put an F in front of it and say, can it be a frontier state? Not exactly the right spelling, but forgive me on that. But is it a frontier state? I mean, get some sense of it. But if it is a frontier state that historically occupied a region that connected the subcontinent to Central Asia, to the Middle East, to the Gulf, to the wide world, and to our west, that there is a historic legacy here. I mean, a region that actually, from Alexander the Great, I mean, if you want to go back to the Aryans, I mean, the Rig Veda was supposed to have been written where Pakistan is today. So there is actually a region that actually brought so much from outside and transformed in some ways India, the nature of India. And of course, there's a whole thesis of Indus, man. There is the difference between Indus and the Ganges and the different levels of, there's a whole set of arguments out there. But the interesting thing is, if we conceive of Pakistan as a frontier state, that what it does maybe makes more sense, that it is not unique in that sense. I mean, to be able to combine where you are on the gateway to India in some sense, the land gateway to India, where you can actually use the external and the internal to your own advantage. We're not talking about people here for a minute, so we're not talking about democracy and that kind of stuff. We're talking about the state and its capacity to use the location, which has largely been defined as a resource curse in the case of Pakistan, was its location, and that location, it was seeking rent on its location. But then if it is about location, then you can be less condescending and talk about actually a frontier state that actually has leveraged its position in a particular place to take advantage. And whoever is running that state, we're not talking about the people in that sense. So therefore, I think the idea of a frontier state should be one way of thinking, and I hope the next time I write something, I think there's a way of developing that. the fourth point I wanted to make was on I think there is a problem of condescension across the board. I mean, that of dismissing the state as something that is a frontier state. We used to say, Allah, Army, America. There was, it's just the army. So this kind of simplification of Pakistan, I think, is part of a problem, because that actually becomes an obstacle to understanding Pakistan. Because even in the book, I mean, one quibble I have, I mean, when you talk about the role, the relationship of Pakistan with the US and China, you talk about 62, 63 when the relationship seemed to have changed. But the account of Muhammad Ali Bogra's meeting with Chawanla in Bandung, we're talking about 55, when there was Hindi Chini Baiba was at its height. Pakistan was one of the Pakistan, Sri Lanka were the trusted, shall we say agents is too strong a word. I mean, they were the pro-Western group in Bandung. So on the first day, Bogra starts by criticizing China, criticizing Wise Nehru, bringing in China into this into this grouping, and then you have the meeting between Bogra and Chawanla. Chawanla says, "Look, you might be part of Seattle Centum, and how does it matter to me? We don't have a problem." So you have, by the end of the conference, Bogra is quite happily supporting the Chinese. I mean, supposed to be the representative of the West in an Afro-Asian meeting. So my sense is that, look, and then within 15 years, they become the bridge between America and China. So this idea that they're not anybody's rentier, they're not there out there to be manipulated by someone. This idea that outsiders manipulate Pakistan, which is so common in our literature, but for the Americans or but for the Chinese. After all, Pakistan is our cousins. Everything would be fine if only there are no outsiders dividing us. So since that absolves us of our own faults, of course. But so I think we got to give agency to Pakistan. That they've been at a time when India was far more schematic, far more mechanical in its understanding of the world. Here, the Pakistani leadership was willing to see the possibilities that, look, you can be pro-US and pro-China, that you don't have to make the choices that India was struggling with, that actually Bogra could bridge that gap and that works for them, and finally Kissinger goes to China from Pakistan. So it's far more been creative in that sense, to be able to use the opportunities that have come its way, rather than the kind of very textual, schematic kind of thing that we have done. But I think if we go back, I mean, there are other problems. The way partition happened, the nature of the relationship between Muslim League and the West during the final years of the Second World War, the Congress attitude to the Second World War. You had, so there was a prehistory. I mean, if you want to say, so I think unless we introduce that into understanding Pakistan's evolution, it's very easy to say everything happened after 47. So I think we need to, on the foreign policy side as well, what was the worldview of the Muslim League? We really, if you look at the Congress's worldview pre-47 and the Muslim League's worldview, there is actually, you can see the core of the divergent worldviews that begins to emerge. So there is out there something. It's not merely feeling, threatened by India, but actually there is the way they reacted to the world in the framing years is very important. Look, do we underestimate the prospect for change in Pakistan? In defining it as a frontier state or whatever it is, because after all, Pakistan today is not the same Pakistan of 47, it's not the same Pakistan of 57, it's not the same Pakistan of 77. Change is the only essence of law. So do we condition at least some of our thinking, some of our policies, that the prospect for change, that change is inevitable? How that takes place, we might not know. But I think if we don't give space for that in our understanding of Pakistan, I think we are the ones who are going to make big mistakes. And I think that is going to be a problem, because Pakistan is not a small state, whatever you might call it, 200 million people, one of the largest states in the world, one of the oldest armies, has nuclear weapons, has a location. So whether we like it or not, the question is its evolution must be understood and the prospects for change.